Welcome to Victory Online. In this episode of the podcast, Bob is talking to Keshia Stewart about how she went from being involved in low-level crime and doing drugs at age only 11 to become an award-winning entrepreneur helping the next generation.
And yet another Victory Online podcast. And today it will be with Keshia Stewart. Keshia is now an award-winning Portsmouth entrepreneur, but for years she was embroiled in low-level crime after growing up on a council estate in Somerstown. Keshia, welcome to Victory.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much for inviting me in.
I've been watching your social media posts for quite a while, and you're very good at it, or somebody in your organisation is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I must give a lot of credit is due there to Leah Wallace, who's marketing manager across all of our businesses. So yeah, she does help me and help me with the imposter syndrome. She's great.
I like that. Yeah. Let's kind of rewind and tell me about your upbringing first, and you know, the fact that you were brought up in an area probably not exactly poverty-stricken, but not a great area to grow up in. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. I don't like to use the term poverty. You know, yes, there were elements of deprivation, and we were definitely poor. You know, my mum had 4 children by 4 different guys, and even that in and of itself is a lot for any child to handle,
For sure.
right?
How many brothers and sisters have I got?
Yeah, right. And I mean, I've got 5 brothers and 4 sisters in total, which is just crazy. And I don't share the same 2 parents with any of them. And then I guess throw into that as well that I was the only mixed race child in my household. So the other children that my mum had were all white, and then I'm half African Arab. But I didn't have much of a relationship with my dad, so I don't know much about the culture. And yeah,
it's obviously not the best start in life, to say the least. And all growing up in the same house, or
yeah, I mean, my mum's 4 children, we grew up in the same household. There were 3 of us in particular that she had sort of, I guess, not long after each other. And then my youngest sister was born when I was 15, when I was doing my GCSEs. But yeah, so yeah, all of us, but none of our dads were present. None of our dads were around. Yeah, mum was on income support and...
Sure, yeah. I'm not going to ask the obvious question. Was mum a good mum? I'm sure she was. She had 9 kids. She must have been a mum of a working mum.
No.
Say what you want to say.
Yeah, it's a hard one because you don't want to go down that road of defamation of character and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, you know, my mum had 4 children, 4 different guys. She was, you know, into drugs and drama and that kind of thing. We don't have a relationship. I haven't had a relationship with my mum since I left home at 16. And I did then try for a few years in my late teens to kind of develop some kind of relationship with her. But it's one of those ones where I didn't want to be in that world. And if I had have embraced that world and maybe, you know, got pregnant like she did at a young age, and maybe we would have been the best of friends. Did
you avoid the world of drugs growing up?
No.
Tell me a little about that.
I mean, I started using drugs when I was about 11. So it started obviously with fags and then, you know, smoking pot, Moroccan hash, and then weed, and you get all that weed with THC on it and the drama.
All that paranoia.
All of that fun stuff, yeah, which obviously over time doesn't become so fun. And then there was the class A's like ecstasy and speed, which eventually led into cocaine. Yeah, but...
I just want to stop you there. It's a term I hate using, but I need to do this because I'm aware, and you will be aware, of course, because that was your background. You're a clean living lady now with wonderful businesses that we will be talking about.
Yeah.
But Portsmouth is rife with cocaine.
Yeah. It's
sad, isn't it?
It is really sad. And do you know what? When I left home, I honestly thought that I'd left that world behind. And then I remember going to a party at an apartment in Gunwharf when I was about 19. And the apartment was full of people on a Saturday night who were, you know, there was cocaine everywhere, all over the kitchen side. Everybody could just kind of help themselves. And it was a real moment of
Wake up call?
Yeah, because all of the people in that particular environment, I remember one of the ladies was wearing the most fabulous shoes, and I remember saying to her, "Oh my God, your shoes are incredible. Oh well, if you live a life like I do one day, maybe you can have a pair." And I was like, "Oh well, what do you do for work?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer." And wow. And then there was another guy there who was CID. There was another guy who owned the apartment who was a stockbroker in London. And that just blew my mind, because I thought that all of that kind of stuff only happened on council estates and in that world.
Or even in films.
Exactly. And then you're just kind of hit. And then I remember working in a pub when I eventually went on to university at like 2021. And I made all of these friends who were from really privileged backgrounds. They went to private schools and they had parents that were doctors and things like that. And actually their drug use was far worse than the drug use I experienced as a young child, because they had the money and they had the backing of their parents and things,
exactly,
you know.
Yeah,
and
scary.
I think also it's because what I noticed with a lot of the people that I met in the world of being like middle class and kind of higher up on the society, you know, hierarchy, is that they didn't experience the crackheads, the heroin addicts in the same way that I did and my peers did when I was younger. So they had less fear and less understanding of actually what the outcomes of drug addiction can be. So it's actually a lot scarier. And they're more susceptible to having overdoses and taking it too far and not being able to, pull themselves out of the spiral of drug addiction.
Yeah, I need to come back in because I said you will have a brief look back on your history and where you came from, and we could talk all day on that alone.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting story. And then in our opening, I'd said that you are an award-winning business lady.
Yes, indeed.
So the transition from one to the other obviously didn't happen overnight.
No, absolutely not. And that's something that, you know, I always try to make clear when given the opportunity, is that, you know, it's not like I just woke up one day and was this, you know, perfect role model or anything. It definitely takes time. And from the age of 16 right through until I was about 22, I was, you know, still making lots of mistakes. I wasn't breaking the law or committing crimes, but, you know, I was still, you know, making mistakes with relationships, friendships, you know, recreational drug use and things like that. But which I guess is habitual through the upbringing, through the childhood, the teenage days. And yeah, I think in some respects, absolutely. But I think what I never lost sight of was, you know, from the age of 16, I always held down a full-time job. From the age of 20, I was then back in education and I was going to university. So, you know.
Did you have the need to do well? That's a question I thought of asking you right from the very beginning. But because of where you came from, did that feed the need?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an element of feeling like I had something to prove to the world.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's ever really left me. But I think that it was also, you know, when you grow up and your parents never attend a parents' evening, or they, you know, you do the local rock challenge dance competition and nobody's there to watch you. There was this part of me, definitely until I sort of became a mum myself, where I was craving that acceptance and that attention, where my parents would maybe just finally want me in their life and be like, oh, you've done so well, you've achieved so much. And that overachieving started from a very young age, but nothing ever worked, so I gave up.
Well, and here you are today, an extremely confident human being that's very successful in business, and your background is what it is, and you've left it behind you, which is brilliant, and you haven't forgotten it, which is even more brilliant. And you know, that, so it's not necessarily a need to do well as just to not be the person you were brought up to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair way of kind of summarising it. Absolutely. I never wanted to live the life that I was brought up in. Like, you know, the fear of being homeless, the fear of being cold during the winter, the fear of, you know, having no food, that's what perpetuates me on. You know, I'm fully aware that you can, you know, mess up at any point in your life, and you could lose everything, and that's my biggest fear. I would never want to go back to where I started.
Yeah. I mean, prizes don't come easy, and the prizes that you have is a successful life now, and you are a successful businesswoman. You now run a successful fashion brand.
Yeah.
What's that about? How did that start?
Oh, Politely Rebellious is my absolute newest baby. I love her. You say it like, you know, I say it like, you know, she's a real life being. But I do believe that when you become truly passionate about any business, the fire kind of kicks in when they become an extension of you, when they become your baby and they've got a name and they've got a purpose, and you want to nurture it and into success, you know, just like you do a child.
Absolutely. My first business, I didn't name it. My brother named it. He's no longer with us, and I was 19 and I opened I was in the rag. Mum was in the rag trade. I was in the rag trade, and I opened this shop in Bognor Regis. I was on £27 a week in a factory as a sewing machine mechanic.
Amazing.
And I remember that because the rent on the shop was £27 a week. God, if only that was that today.
Oh, wow.
So at 19, by the time I was 23, I had 3 shops. I'm not doing this to brag about my life. I just understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
But I can honestly say, and I get the feeling with you, it is probably similar. I never set anything up for the money. It's because I wanted to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of my things have been passion projects, not necessarily, you know, profit making. I mean, my core business, which is recruitment, and, you know, that's what I do to pay the mortgage. And, you know, that does pay well when recruitment is going and people are actually recruiting. When you're in the middle of a pandemic or a financial crisis, not so much. But in the grand scheme of things, you know, that is what bought me my house. That is what renovated our house. That's the business that's enabled us to travel the world. But again, even with that, it's been a lifestyle business. It's not never set it up because I wanted to create this huge recruitment agency that had 200 members of staff, Wolf of Wall Street style, and sell it for millions of pounds. I wanted to create a business where I would have time to be that corporate person and be the breadwinner, but also spend time with my child and travel the world.
And obviously from what we've said, I can understand how important that is to you. What was the first business you actually set up?
Actually, the first one that I set up was when I was at uni. So I must have been about 23, 24 at the time, and it was called English Direct. And again, it was a social enterprise. So I was studying English language and literature at university, partly because I wanted to get rid of the in-it cushy geezer type talk that I was embroiled in. I wanted to learn the Queen's English. And now I've just kind of amalgamated the two because you can't forget where you came from, right? So there's definitely still some in-its and cushies in my house.
And neither should you. I think that's a big part of who you are today, and it's never going to leave you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the older I've got, the more I've been comfortable with embracing it, and like sharing my story, and you know, the need to want to do more and do for others has enabled me to understand that it starts with my story.
Absolutely. And the fact that you've got the background of a good business that gives you a lifestyle, and you can then experiment with other things that you can be even more impassioned in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel that, you know, you mentioned there about my first business, and my first business, English Direct, was a social enterprise where I charged students whose first language wasn't English. So I would charge them to proofread their essays and dissertations. And then off the back of that, for every customer I was charging, I was also seeing a young person who was not in education, employment or training. And for free, I was helping them write a CV and generate a kind of plan and structure for their future.
Yeah. And it's great that you can do that. And not every moment in your working life is to make a buck. And neither should it be. And particularly with people that have the skill of being successful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's an interesting one because when I first left university, I mean, with English Direct, I actually won the Enterprise Challenge at the university. I won an award for most creative student performance. And, you know, I was in the local paper. Like, there was so much kicking off. And when I came out of university, I wanted to take that forwards, and I wanted to I wanted to take a social enterprise to the next level. And I was coming out of university and going into meetings with Solent Local Enterprise Partnership, Hampshire County Council. But I was like a deer in headlights. At the time I was like 25, 26. I didn't understand politics. I didn't understand, the nature of kind of playing that game of, you need people to back you and understand you. So I was sat there having meetings with, all of these really powerful people, but in reality, none of them, because of their backgrounds and the lives that they'd come from, none of them could understand where I was coming from and what I was trying to achieve.
Yeah. You so you started that business early, whilst at uni, and you've run other businesses. And we'll get to the end goal in a minute, if ever there is one in life.
I know, right?
But you've been through other businesses. Just a quick synopsis on what they're about.
So when I realised that I needed to kind of get more experience in the kind of big wide world, especially, the world of, corporate and middle-aged white dudes, I kind of needed to understand how their psyche worked and everything. So I actually threw myself into recruitment, and I'd done that for a few years, working for some really big, well-known recruitment agencies. And then after a few years, I decided that I would do that myself, that I could come.
Recruitment in itself is a high-flying industry, isn't it? You need dynamic people up front.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a
high-energy business.
Yeah, and I think people don't always, a lot of people don't even understand the concept of recruitment and what it is. You could go your whole career with never having used a recruitment agency or needed that. But actually, in the UK alone, it's like a £28 billion industry. It's huge. Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And I think what I realised after a few years of being in that industry is I'd reached the leadership level, I'd reached management, but I was still the only woman of colour in the organisation. I was still one of less than a handful of women that were part of the leadership team. And I would find that I was being kind of used because I was ticking those boxes. But actually, when I was sitting in a boardroom with all of, these, middle-aged white dudes who were, middle class, I remember the last meeting I had with my director was, Keshia, you need to just learn when to shut up.
And I'll interrupt you there. What's suddenly crossed my mind is the fact that the recruitment industry is all about the buck.
Yeah.
It isn't about the end user. It's never about that. It's about the guy at the top making bigger money and you getting that.
You getting your 2% or 5% of it.
Yeah. And hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I got to a point where I was billing, nearly 200 grand a year, but I was only seeing like 28 grand of that. Yeah. And at the time, I thought that was amazing. I'd just got a mortgage, my son was a couple of years old, and I thought I'd made it. And then I sat there one day and was like, hang on, I set up my own business when I was at uni. This recruitment malarkey, I've learned how to do it. I could be making that 200k myself,
Yeah.
And so that's what I done.
That's exactly where my business started when I was 19. Yeah. I'll tell you that off air in a minute. But so, and then you've got a wellness business.
Yeah. So we've got JK Wellness, which is a wellbeing studio and retail store. Which at this moment in time is on the Havant Road in Drayton. We've got a really nice spot where the Rowans Hospice used to be. We actually opened in October of 2020. We got that space and we wanted, at the time, because of the pandemic, recruitment had gone really quiet. Yeah. I was bored, going stir crazy, 6 months. I spent the summer just kind of lounging around. I had enough money in the bank that I could keep doing that for another 6 to 12 months. But I was like, do you know what? Let me invest it in something that will keep me busy. And I really wanted to be a part of a community, like when people can knock on your door for a cup of milk or a cup of sugar. I'd never really experienced that.
Those days are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in my day, people would knock on your door for a packet of Sovereign or, a Rizzler to make a spliff. But I wanted to experience what that was like kind of on the other side of life. And so, I mean, JK Wellness has been an absolute, passion project. Yes, it is profit making, but it's not profit making where it's going to pay the mortgage. It's more about creating that sense of community. We've run so many free workshops and we've had, given the space pro bono to lots of different causes over the last 4.5 years. And the people that come in on a daily basis just to talk about how their appointment went at the doctor's, or, you know, the fact that their husband just had a heart attack, or they might have just lost their parents, or they might be experiencing suicidal thoughts. We've been that safe space for people. I always say that, yes, you know, I can't give away the incense sticks for free, but chats are always free.
Yeah, talk costs nothing and people should talk.
Yeah.
So how do you get from that into where you are today with the Rebellious business?
Yeah, so this is one of our newest designs, actually, Emancipate Yourself, which came off of the back of a radio session I'd done with Paul Marsh, actually, at Express FM. And he said, oh, what song do you want me to play? And I said, oh, Emancipate Yourself by Bob Marley. And I just find the words of that just really resonate with me. But yeah, with Politely Rebellious, it's an interesting one because for years I've been referring to myself as being politely rebellious. So whether that would be in general conversation with friends or, you know, people that I work with. And then it then spiraled into statuses on Facebook where I would say, oh, you know, yes, we've reached lockdown 2 weeks after opening JK Wellness, but don't fret, I'm going to be turning into a greengrocer's overnight because I'm politely rebellious and I'm not breaking the law. I can do that. And
sorry, but Politely Rebellious is the brand.
Yes.
And does it manufacture clothes? Also, does it sell clothing?
Yeah, absolutely. But where it kind of stemmed from was me referring to myself as being politely rebellious.
It all came from you.
Yeah. And then like 2 years ago, I decided, you know what? Yeah, that's actually a really good term. That I've kind of coined that in my, you know, social media presence. I'm going to trademark it. So I trademarked the term politely rebellious. At that time, I had no idea what I was going to do with it. This was back in 2022. I didn't have a clue. I was like, right, I'm just going to trademark it and then see what manifests itself in my 3 a.m. moments of, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know those ones, right? That's when the greatest ideas happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then fast forward a year. So to this time in 2023, me and Leah Wallace, who's, as I mentioned earlier, is our marketing manager, we kind of realised that actually we could take this into a clothing brand. So, you know, if we could get people understanding what being politely rebellious is, we could get people to buy into it as a product and as a brand that they'd be proud to represent.
Sure. Are you wholesaling, retailing, or doing both?
So when we first started out, we were buying in bulk and then selling it that way. But that was a lot of money and a lot of cost, and actually not particularly eco-friendly. So we switched about 6 months ago now to being print on demand. So yeah, we're now a print on demand model. We work with an organisation called Vector, who are based in Burgess Hill. So you will buy it from our website, but then it's only printed once it's purchased, and then it's sent direct out to the customer.
And no stock holding, which is great.
Yeah, and it makes more sense from a financial perspective.
So your business is as much about, well, it's probably more about the marketing.
Absolutely.
Da-da.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. And that's what we were finding really difficult, to be honest, is, you know, I look at brands like Under Armour, Nike, you know, even White Fox, which has blown up recently. Boys Get Sad Too, Men Get Sad Too. You know, these are brands that have started from nothing, just like me, but now they're viral and they're huge. And it's like, well, how do you make, without masses of money behind you or investors, how do you get that in front of people? Which is where the podcast came in. So
yeah. Go for it. I'm intrigued by your podcast because that is obviously where a lot of awareness does come from, and buying awareness is incredibly expensive. And if you can create your own, and I know you've got a non-profit making podcast organisation, so it all ties together nicely.
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the things there isn't public knowledge yet, but will be in the new year, and, you know, I'm happy for you to have this as an exclusive, but what people haven't been privy to is that there was always a wider business strategy in place. So we have actually now registered Politely Rebellious Next Generation, which is a community interest company. And what that means is that up until this point, what you've seen on social media is us having this non-profit making podcast, which is all about raising aspirations and inspiring people. What we've been doing with the profits of Politely Rebellious is actually reinvesting it into the community, which you would have already seen if you followed us on socials, by way of we sponsor an under 11 girls football team from Paulsgrove.
I saw that, yeah.
You know, we sponsor their kits, we sponsor their tracksuits, which they're getting next week. And then we've also sponsored local absolute legend Michael McKinson in his local fight that he had that was aired on Sky Sports. So I haven't actually made any money for my pocket from Politely Rebellious. It's all been going back into the community. And what we're about to do in 2025 is take that to a whole new level. So we are now going to organisations that give money to community interest companies like the local authority, like the police and crime commissioners, and also even organisations like the National Lottery and Children in Need. And we're saying, look, we've got this brand. We've proven over the last 12 months that we can generate our own money, because you do have to do that as a social enterprise. A lot of people don't realise that. We can generate money. We have created a brand that people have bought into. We now want to use that brand to inspire the next generation.
Yeah, and the benefit there would be I suppose intergenerational people, really.
Absolutely. I mean, what we now want to do is we want to use this network of diverse people that we've built up, and we want to utilise them and their stories to go into schools and secondary schools to inspire people. You remember back in the day when you would have like gladiators coming to the local schools?
Yeah.
And you could have your...
No.
Yeah. Well, back when I was a little girl, you could have like the gladiators would come in, or Frank Bruno came into my school once.
Yeah.
And you could have your photo taken with them, and they would tell their story and their journey and the obstacles that they've overcome throughout their life. And those are things, as a child who had no role models and no one to look up to, those are things that I remember so vividly that inspired me to be like, well, they've come from nothing and look at where they are. That's what I want to create.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It almost begs the question, where do we go from here? But I feel that we've already got there. So, Keshia Stewart, at your tender young age, running all these businesses and not looking worn out by it at all. And
I mean really?
That,
I feel like I look really tired today.
I mean it sincerely. You're really buoyed up, and obviously, energy isn't just built out of doing the right things. It's your attitude to something, and your energy is pretty high. And obviously, you've got a wellness centre, which presumably helps a lot. But obviously, enthusiasm breeds energy, and there's no bigger substitute for that, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I think that I'm entering like a new era in my life. Like, I'm a few years away from 40. I've always said that I don't want to go into my 40s doing recruitment. There's something else. I've always known that there's something else that I'm meant to be doing. And so I feel like all of that high energy and enthusiasm is because I'm finally comfortable with talking about my journey and how that interlopes into what I've done my whole life up to this point, but how I'm then going to utilise that for the greater benefit of the wider community going into 2025. I'm just really excited about it. I've just been asked to be an entrepreneur in residence at the University of Portsmouth, which, to be honest, when I got that call last week, blew my mind, because when I was a mature student at uni, I didn't graduate until I was 25. It was a struggle to, pay my way through university. I had to work full time. But there were people that I looked up to. And I remember Rachel Lowe was the first female entrepreneur in residence when I was just graduating from university. Donna Jones had just become the first female leader of Portsmouth City Council. And those types of role models used to blow my mind. So now to be at the university as an entrepreneur in residence alongside Rachel Lowe, to have Donna Jones coming on my podcast and wanting to listen to my story and what my business ideas are for the next generation of Portsmouth, that to me is mind blowing. You could give me all the millions of pounds in the world, which I don't have, by the way, and that in itself is success to me.
I think it's fantastic, and there is a connection here with, and I don't again want to put the focus on me, but I've known Donna since she was a young girl. And when you see her next, say, "Oh, Bob wants to talk to you."
I love
so
that.
she grew up in the house next door to me.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And do you know what? When she came in for her podcast recording last week, it blew my mind, her story, because, like myself, people have this perception of you, and, the fact that you've had this career and you live in a nice house in Drayton, and they don't know what the 20 years or 30 years prior to that, they don't know what the journey's been. And so I think giving people the opportunity and the platform to be able to tell that story, and Donna Jones is a perfect example of a Pompey girl who has absolutely reached elements of success that I'm sure she never thought was possible.
Absolutely. She became the leader of Portsmouth Council, and now, as we know, the police commissioner for Hampshire. And I knew at probably 7 or 8 years old that girl was going to do well.
Really?
She had the most amazing determination in anything that she did.
Yeah.
And I think her parents are really proud of her, and they should be too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think hearing her story, which actually airs on our Politely Rebellious podcast, hearing what her parents done is just phenomenal. To get her through private school and stuff like that is amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, her dad grafted to make that happen. Which is your Facebook post there, her Facebook page. There was one, and it was some of your friends that are saying you're becoming a media magnet or something or other. I can't remember. What was that?
Oh yeah, what was that actually?
I think because you'd been on Express and in the news.
There'd been I think because of the media coverage recently, and somebody, a lovely lady, Jo actually, who I met through the shop, through JK Wellness, and all of these wonderful people that I've met who live in Drayton and Farlington, who have supported me from the day one that I opened that shop, is just amazing. But yeah, she said something like, "Oh, you're becoming a celebrity," and I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh, Z-lister, I'll take it." And she was like, "We'll see you in the jungle next." But it's just so nice. Like when the news ran the short documentary that they filmed, which got to give shout out to Habs, who works down at the news, and he was just like yourself, just creating a safe space where I felt like I could share, and that documentary went out and it went viral not in the grand schemes of the world. Obviously, we're not talking, we're not talking Ariana Grande viral. We're talking Pompey. But that 12-minute documentary got thousands of hours of views, which blew my mind. When Habs told me, I was just like, that's insane. And when that got posted on the news's Facebook page, and I would look at it every couple of days, and the likes and the comments just kept going up and up and up. And I think it ended up with like 300 likes and like hundreds of comments where people genuinely had watched that, me talking about stealing at 6 years old to then leaving home at 16, but then, living on the slopes of Drayton now. There was not one negative comment.
And that in itself rounds up this story really, really well. From being a little toe rag thief,
I know,
to running many businesses, and now running businesses that look after other people, which is the whole goal.
The whole goal, of everything that I do. I mean, I've always done pro bono work, even when I've been knee deep in the recruitment and wanting to make money to travel the world. I've always done the pro bono stuff right across the city. That's always been, I've always been giving back, and I think that it's now a time where I put that into a, kind of structured business format, and just give back on a whole different level. I want to leave a legacy. And the thing with a community interest company is that you can't sell it. You hand it over to the community.
God, this so much feels like my story, because I'm just about to set up a CIC for Victory. I want to get the Radio Victory Academy going. Intergenerational training people of all ages.
There's a lot of synergy there, Bruce. I can see us working together in the future. Inspiring the next generation.
Absolutely, and I would love that. I would really love that. One, because your energy is immense and your aspirations are just as big.
Oh, I really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much for having me in.
Keshia Stewart, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Victory.
If you've enjoyed watching this podcast, then make sure you click that like button, and remember to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more of our podcasts. And don't forget, you can listen in where we're busy making radio like it used to be on your DAB radio or online at victoryonline.co.uk. And you can also listen to us on your smart speaker. Just ask it to tune in to Victory Online. Thanks for watching and hope to see you again soon.